Randall movie.
Welcome, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question-and-answer session of the call. If anyone would like to ask a question at that time, you may press star, then 1. Today's conference is being recorded. If anyone has any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I'd like to introduce your host for the day, Ms. S.A. Workey. You may begin.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the When Helping Hurts Self-Care Strategies for Refugee Community Leaders and Service Providers webinar. My name is S.A. Workey. I'm the Director of the Division of Refugee Health within the Office of Refugee Resettlement. I want to take a moment to thank the co-sponsors of this webinar at the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, in particular, Chelsea Booth and Nancy Kelly. Today we'll spend about an hour and 15 minutes. We'll provide brief opening remarks by the Deputy Director of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, Ken Toda. We'll then have a presentation by Nancy Kelly of SAMHSA. We'll have a few brief check-in moments during the presentation to offer a moment for questions and answers and understanding. And then we'll conclude the presentation. I also want to take a moment to share my own thoughts about the importance of this webinar. We hope that there are many, many, many refugees listening in, especially those of you who feel a huge sense of responsibility for your community. The Office of Refugee Resettlement recognizes that community leaders play a very important role in helping to resettle refugees in the United States, and that refugees often turn first to other refugees when important life events happen, like birth or death in the community or in the family, and that because of the role that you play, sometimes community leaders are so busy helping to take care of other people that they often forget to take care of themselves. But to be a leader and a role model, it's important to take care of your own health. And as you listen to the presentation today and the opening remarks from our Deputy Director, I would just ask that you keep in mind 3 things. One is that you are important. You by yourself, outside of any role that you play, are important, and that you alone can take care of yourself. And thirdly, that you have a responsibility, you have a duty, you have an obligation to take care of yourself. So with that off of my chest, I'll turn it over to Ken Toda, our Deputy Director, for the opening remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, S.A. I just wanted to take a minute, certainly thank everyone for joining in on the call today. The topic for this webinar really stems from ORR hearing about the increasing number of suicides in the resettlement community over the years. And in fact, we learned of another one today that had happened over the weekend. These are very, very tragic events, and we know that it's very, very difficult to hear that refugees who have made it this far and then in the end up taking their own lives. And at the same time, we very much know that community leaders and service providers are the front lines, and they're to support the families and try to put the pieces together after what certainly the events that have happened. They may be related to suicide, but there are also many other distressing situations that have happened recently and certainly happened in communities dealing with other illnesses, domestic violence, traumatic events, or even natural disasters. And even though these events may not occur to you directly, helping others who have experienced it can cause a great deal of stress on you and certainly probably your staff. So the real objective of this call today is, as S.A. said, is to really make sure that you are there to take care of those you're serving, but at the same time, really to be able to take care of yourself. We're hoping that this presentation can help to provide some tools and help you to sort of refocus to make sure that you do that. Your ability to support certainly the community and those you serve is only as good as what you are able to do, and it's important that you have a good basis to do that. And I just wanted to say that we're very, very thankful for our working relationship with SAMHSA. They've been a great partner, and we certainly appreciate their presentation and time today, and certainly hope that their expertise will help you in staying tuned in and have the ability to serve those in your community. So again, thank you for joining in today.
Thank you very much, Ken. I'll just take a moment now to introduce our speaker, Nancy Kelly. Nancy is a public health advisor at SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. She works for the Center for Mental Health Services with the Federal Emergency Management Agency Crisis Counseling Assistance and Training Program. Before arriving at CMHS, she served as a project director and senior training and technical assistance specialist with the Education Development Center. Ms. Kelly was assigned to work with the National Center for Mental Health Promotion and Youth Violence Prevention, providing training and technical assistance on the Safe Schools, Healthy Students Project and the Tribal Youth Program. She served as a project director for the Improving Mental Health Assessment and Service Delivery for Youth Expelled from Schools in California, study funded by the California Endowment Fund. She has also served as the vice principal of a kindergarten through 8th grade school and an adjunct professor and lecturer of psychology and education. Ms. Kelly also served in grant programs related to substance abuse prevention and intervention, mental health prevention and early intervention, academic success, violence prevention, and social emotional well-being. Thank you very much. Nancy, we're glad to have you.
Thanks, S.A. I'm happy to be here, and I'd like to take a minute to let my colleague who invited me to be a part of this, Chelsea Booth, to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say how delighted we are to be here with you to be talking about self-care strategies. And to all of my Nepali-speaking friends out there, I wanted to say a big namaste. I'm very delighted that we were able to help the community. I lived in Nepal for many years, and we are just delighted to be able to help in the refugee community more broadly. So back to Kelly. Nancy.
I answered to Kelly. Okay, Andre, you're advancing for me?
Yes.
Thank you. So with Chelsea and I thought it would be a good way to start this presentation by giving you some general trauma, disaster response, traumatic event response information before we kick off into the secondary trauma and self-care aspects. And this is to do with, we use this information when we're working with the communities across the country that have experienced natural disasters and or human-made disasters. And after those events, you know, we have the human reactions to trauma that I know all of you are familiar with, and each and every one of us are, and anyone who's exposed to a traumatic event has a reaction to it. But the research shows us that most naturally do recover from the traumatic event. There are some people who will have serious and severe reactions, and few people will develop diagnosable conditions because of the traumatic event. Most people who are involved in the traumatic event do not seek treatment, and survivors often will reject help. And this is important to us in our work in the crisis counseling program, specifically, which is a SAMHSA FEMA project that we do with presidentially declared disasters. And we provide outreach to those communities immediately following the disaster and up to 1+ years following it to make sure that we reach out and contact all survivors in the community that's impacted. Next. Thanks. So everyone, as I said earlier, is who experiences trauma is affected by it. People do pull together during and after traumatic events, and just like in grief, where we have stages of grief, we also have stages of response to events, where we have the event, we have a honeymoon phase, you know, where everyone pulls together and there's heroes and we're all saving the world and saving each other. And then there's that kind of downward trend when people leave, when FEMA leaves, when our volunteer organizations might leave, when help that has come into our community, they leave to go back to their lives, and we're left alone and facing this traumatic event and the aftermath of the event and to fend for ourselves. And then through the course of the year, with the anniversary, we start finding our way back to surviving and creating a new, as we say, a new normal. So stress and grief are common reactions to a very uncommon situation. All those reactions that people feel following a traumatic event are absolutely normal, as our definition of normal in our day and age. And people's natural resilience typically support individuals and the collective recovery. And the term collective recovery speaks to our community recovery. Next slide. So in reactions, as I just said, that there are typically reactions as we continue to function. We're resilient. We might be sad, but we carry on with our days. We figure out a way to regroup and go on with our lives. There are severe reactions, and we should be aware of those severe reactions, and that those could be depression, substance abuse, or an increased use in alcohol or drugs, or start using them if we didn't use them before. Social isolation, meaning that we don't reach out to our friends that we had, we don't go to church perhaps, we stop engaging in community things and with our family that we may have before the event. Anxiety disorders, we have increased worrying, and it may be about issues that normally wouldn't cause us concern, post-traumatic stress disorder, and suicidal behavior that we unfortunately heard about today. Rachel?
And also, depending on which cultural community you're working with, there may also be very culturally specific reactions to trauma that we can't really get into here because there are so many different cultures in the world, but it is important to be responsive and through all of this know that both reactions and the way that people cope often depend on different cultural practices and ways of experiencing trauma.
So this is just a real quick, Andre, I skipped you. I went and forwarded myself. I knew I would find a way. I have to have control. Chelsea knows that. This is just a nice graphic, and what this is explaining to you is in disaster work, there's a risk factors population exposure model is what it's called. And basically all it means is that the closer you are to the event, the higher degree of risk factors that you may encounter. So A, in the very center, and let's just use the recent Moore, Oklahoma tornadoes that we had. So those families, those children and families that were attended that school, they would be A. They would be the injured survivors and the bereaved family members. They have the highest degree of risk factors to, show symptoms for some of possibilities of severe reactions. And then the farther out you are from the impact or the experience of the trauma yourself, which E is the affected people from the larger community. And the D, next to that is the people who lost homes, jobs, and possessions, or people with pre-existing trauma, at-risk groups, disaster responders, the people who work with volunteer in the community, they would be D. They would be in that fourth ring out from the trauma, and so on. So that's just a nice graphic to show you the risk factor potential. So there's two types of trauma. One is individual trauma that happens to us ourselves, and the second type of trauma is collective trauma. And individual trauma may cause stress and grief, fatigue, irritable, hopelessness, relationship conflict, all those things that, you know, when I look at this list, it could happen to us day to day, actually, as well. So those are individually, and that's how we learn to cope with and live. Collective trauma is when we have damage to our community support, when our infrastructure is damaged. And if there's enough individuals that are traumatized in the community, that then also fractures that community support. And it affects individual coping. You know, oftentimes you don't realize how much we rely on our community until our community isn't there for us, and then we feel even more alone. It's those points of organization and control we have every day and support that we realize is what gives us strength.
Well, and there can be, especially if you're working with refugee communities, kind of multiple iterations, multiple times where collective trauma happens. Let's say, for instance, you know, they are, let's say, moved from their home country to another country as sort of a staging area. In the refugee camps, people often, even if it's not members of their original community, they do develop strong community supports and able to survive in the refugee camps. When they are then resettled to the U.S. or other countries, that in itself can be a trauma because it's breaking apart of that second community. So they've not only lost their original community and that community structure, but they've lost the second one from the refugee camps.
Excellent point. So individual reactions specifically are physical, emotional, cognitive, and behavioral. And physical could be loss of appetite, nausea, headaches, for example. Emotional, sad, irritable, as we just discussed. Cognitive, students oftentimes report not being able to pay attention in school or might have nightmares. Adults would not be able to maybe concentrate. You often hear at work, so you often hear is asked following months after a disaster in a community, you can read reports and hear that they haven't returned to work. Behavioral, for children, bedwetting could start again. You could see regression in behaviors in children, aggressive behaviors, crying. That even could be adults, except for that, even that bedwetting part. Mm-hmm. That's a joke. I realize you guys, I can't hear you laughing. But again, as we had said, and with our programs here at SAMHSA and FEMA, the Crisis Counseling Program, and in our work with disaster response, we think about resilience. Our work begins with resilience, and that's what we believe in, and we help communities and people get back to resilience. So factors that affect resilience are your life situation, individual traits and coping styles. Are you a strong person anyway? Do you typically are the type of person who can, muster through, so to speak? Do you have experience in disaster and trauma? Have you already incurred disaster or traumas in your life? Do you have a strong family or social support? Do you have those bonds? Do you have spiritual beliefs that you get strength from? Do you have accurate information? And that's a real critical piece, especially in this day and age of social media and the immediate news that we can get via the web, more than we even need. A lot of the media news is inaccurate, and so oftentimes that increases the anxiety level. And we'll oftentimes say to people that, when we're doing outreach and people are experiencing anxiety and just really feeling overwhelmed, we suggest to turn off the TV and stop watching news because oftentimes that is feeding into that anxiety if the information isn't reliable. And is there an effective and caring emergency response? So those supports that Chelsea was just talking about in the communities that we rely so strongly on. So some strategies to improve your resilience if that's the area that you feel you have a weakness in, or your community has a weakness in, or the people you're working with do. So services to survivors can be planned and implemented in ways that naturally promote resilience and recovery. So it doesn't even have to be like a structured thing. People don't even have to know you're working on that with them. And all that we do, and you guys do this every day in your jobs, You promote a sense of safety with the people that you work with and talk to. You use calming techniques. You help people calm down. You listen. You promote a sense of self and collective efficacy. So it's how that person is important. It's those three things that SA said, you know, you are important. You have a responsibility to take care of yourself. You promote connectedness. We always, when we're doing our outreach, we tell people, you know what, I just talked to your neighbor, and in this day of mobility and in living in large apartment buildings and complexes, we often don't even know who our neighbors are. So connecting people to each other, and of course there's always a promotion of hope that we give to people. So that really is, Chelsea and I just wanted to lay the foundation of trauma and reactions as it plays out, not necessarily specific to refugees, but just in the broad sense. The operator can open the phone lines or for any questions, or you can click on your Q&A link and ask questions, type them in. Carolina, I'm hoping that you resolved your phone issue.
Chandra, do we have any questions in queue at this time?
If anyone would like to ask a question at this time, they may press star, then 1.
And there will be other opportunities to ask questions
And that was
later.
really general information, so we'll just keep moving forward. Okay, so hang on one second. Compassion, satisfaction versus fatigue. So now Chelsea and I are going to start going into and talking about directly related to taking care of yourselves and secondary trauma as it relates to working with the refugee populations. And again, Chelsea and I recognize that we're most likely not telling you anything that you guys don't already know. It's just reminding ourselves to do it, give ourselves permission to do it, and to utilize these skills, and just kind of doing a check-in to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. So compassion fatigue, this is a great model because it talks about compassion satisfaction and compassion fatigue, and that lends itself to the quality of our life. And this is geared towards our professional life, but it also transfers to our personal lives as well. So under compassion fatigue, we have burnout and secondary trauma. So that's going to be the focus of our rest of our time today. And compassion fatigue, as we all know, is a normal consequence of working in the field of helping people. And the best strategy to address compassion fatigue is to develop excellent self-care strategies, as well as an early warning system that lets you know that you are moving into the caution zone of compassion fatigue. So not only taking care of ourselves, but recognizing the symptoms that tell us that we maybe aren't taking as good a care of ourselves. We don't want to wait until it's too late. The level of compassion fatigue helper experiences can ebb and flow from one day to the next. And typically when we're fatigued, we tend to work more. We continue to push ourselves past that. And I had a lot of really long research proposals to review this weekend and score. And I was really tired, and I had a lot of work last week, a lot of deadlines and big projects to meet. And it's midnight, and I'm still reading, and I'm like, I can do one more. And I knew that I should have stopped. I should have stopped probably 3 hours prior to that. But you keep pushing yourselves, and that's a signal of you're actually probably fatigued. Kind of like my mom used to tell me that when you're hungry late at night, you're really tired, you should just go to bed. Instead, we eat, or I do anyway. even very healthy helpers with optimal life and work balance and self-care strategies can experience a higher than normal level of compassion fatigue when they are overloaded, are working with a lot of traumatic content, or find their caseload suddenly heavy with clients who are all chronically in crisis. So just some things to keep in mind as we move forward into the presentation. So if we think about compassion satisfaction, that's the positive aspects of helping, and this is related to vicarious resilience. So we're talking about vicarious trauma, and also as well as vicarious resilience. So that's resilience that the people that we're working with are experiencing. So positive aspects of helping, from when we help someone, we get pleasure and satisfaction, and it makes us feel good, and to know that we help someone else feel good and be happy in their life. It may be related to providing care. It may be related to the fact that we're working in a strong, cohesive and comprehensive system. It may have to do with the people that we work with in our offices. You know, our work could be hard, could be dirty, hard, long hours, and extremely stressful, but because the people around us are strong people and are competent and professional people, then the work, we are inspired to do our work. It's those jobs where you said, you know, it's the hardest job I've ever had, but I can't imagine never doing it. That's when you know you're surrounded by people that are strong colleagues. Your belief about yourself. Do you have confidence in yourself and your own skills? And, of course, altruism. It's for the sake of doing good work, for the sake of others. So this is a point of understanding that we just wanted to put out, Chelsea and I wanted to put out, so you can either Chandra will open the phone lines for us, or you can chat your answers to these questions. Hey, box. Just some thoughts, and we'll share with the rest of the group. These are also, and SA gave Chelsea and I this idea before we started, these are really great questions for you to take back to your groups that you work with, your staff, maybe at your next staff meeting, whatever, if you wanted to talk about compassion satisfaction, compassion fatigue. These are really great questions just to start a conversation with. So we'd love for you to type an answer to what's important. Oh, there's a typo, Chelsea, of all of our self-chats.
Oh, no!
So what is important to you about this work, and what motivates you to do this work? Either one of the questions or both you can answer, and Chelsea and I will read them back. And I see we have some questions, too. So as we wait for your chat responses in the Q&A box, we have a question from Kim Liu that says, hang on, let me get to the manage. That says, what are some recommendations for, and for some reason
if you go to the Q&A. Oh, it's not.
I can't get the rest of her question open.
Sorry, our system is freezing a little bit.
I could get Norma's question now. So Norma's, our biggest issue is finding providers in mental health that are able to serve in the native language of the refugee. Any ideas on what is best practice?
That is a very good question.
So that is Norma, and I'd love to have an answer for you. But you've just stumbled upon a worldwide issue, I'm sure. I know it is in our country. You know, even in our grant program with Safe Schools Healthy Students, and you were with school districts, and we had grant money to pay, finding qualified mental health providers, and especially those that had multiple language skills, was a very difficult issue. I know that I can say that some of the projects that I've worked with have actually, and it costs money, but they could put into their grant funds, a service where you could, I think medical facilities and hospitals use it too, that you could call into it, and they would have any and every language and stuff, and they would translate in that regard. They could literally be on the phone, and you could conference call while you're while you're providing the services.
Mm-hmm.
But that sure isn't optimal, and especially not for mental health. If any of our listeners have a solution for Norma, please.
Yeah, we can maybe open it up at the end of the presentation and talk about some strategies that some of you have used to do that. Because what you don't want is to end up, you going along with people to mental health or other physical health appointments, and you certainly don't want to force the young children who are learning the languages and who probably speak both languages. You don't want to force them into the situation where they're always having to translate between the two. So in terms of best practices, I'm not sure we're really there yet. It's a really difficult problem.
Yeah, but you know what? We can sure, you're going to see our contact information at the end of this PowerPoint, and this is going to be archived as well. Please feel free to email me. I love to do research on those kind of things, and Norma, I could sure do my best to track down and see if there are any best practices for you that I could share with you guys. So I would be more than happy to do some more work on that. So to quickly get back to Kim Lou's question, what are some recommendations for management and supporting staff who have been greatly traumatized by the work and clients? That is actually going to be a component. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to supervisors in this presentation, Kim. So if you can hang on, and if we don't end up answering that question, please re-ask it. Jennifer, are there commonalities in people that have a harder time moving on after a traumatic event, those that do require treatment? The commonalities are the people that had pre-existing risk factors prior to the event. So people who had mental health issues, people who did not have a support system, people who were already had substance use issues, people who presented those risk factors that could be post-traumatic event, who already engaged in those behaviors or had those symptoms prior to the event. Those are most likely the people who would have a harder time moving on after a traumatic event.
And it's also important to remember that, for some people, there were traumatic times in their country of origin, and then they immediately moved here to the U.S. That's very different than those people who ended up either being displaced within their country for a number of years and then came here, or those people who were, like the situation in Bhutan and Nepal, who were sent to Nepal, lived there for a number of years in refugee camps, and then came here to the U.S. Those are very different circumstances. And so in those cases, it's not that there was one traumatic event, it's that it's been 15 years of traumatic events. So that's also something to keep in mind, and it's important to know about the community you work with.
That's a really good point, Chelsea. And, this reminds me of, or that question reminds me of the work that I did with the Native American youth and tribes across the country. And they rely heavily on their spirituality, on their history, on their strength as a nation, and the commonalities that they have and they share. So they remember, they hold in highest esteem their elders, and they try not to forget, but in the same respect, move forward. And so it's kind of like to work to keep their legacy. I think that's alive and passed on for future generations is how they deal with that, the getting past the traumatic events. So a couple of comments. Hillary, Hillary, I am motivated by, in answering our questions, what motivates you to do this work? I am motivated by being the provider that doesn't get burned out. This has resulted in burnout for me. Hillary,
so good.
You just hit the nail on the head. You're our poster child. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, Elisa, this is the chat box. Carolina, what's important is that we're the gate openers to new immigrants. We put a friendly face to their new country. It motivates me to see positive results that impact people's lives. That's
wonderful.
Wonderful, Carolina. And I'm reading it out loud because we can't save the chat box as we found out, but it's being recorded so that way we'll hear this conversation. So in the transcripts. Asrar, if I'm saying your name correctly, I look for Chelsea, the Miss Bilingual person here, cares about the clients, and it is very rewarding when they see them successful, and absolutely. And Lorraine has her hand raised, so Lorraine, if you want to talk, you can press star.
Operator, what is it? Star
1?
Star 1 if you'd like to ask a question.
Yes. So feel free to press star 1 if you'd like to tell us the answers of what motivates you to do the work. And what's the other question? Oh, what's important to you about the work?
Tina says this is a great resource for the question about language access. Oh, and so Tina shared this resource that I am...
Tina, if you could email, you'll find our email at the last slide.
I'm saving that.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Tina, and I'm going to, I'm going to preserve that, Tina, so don't worry. We'll have that, okay? And we will share that with
Thank you.
Andre and Essay so they can make sure it's with the archived information. Thank you very much. It's refugeehealthpa.org, and that's addressing the language access barrier when serving refugee patients. So we'll make sure Norma gets that. Another person said, I do believe in working with refugees because I enjoy helping people to adjust in a foreign country, especially if there is a language barrier. Armand is motivated by applying his training. It makes him happy and knowing that he has continued challenges in his profession. I, too, like challenges. So we're just going to go a few more. Sabrina understands that mental health workers strive to be culturally competent in helping refugee communities, but how do you challenge the perception, attitude, and awareness of refugee communities toward mental health and mental health professionals? If perception is not right, how is treatment going to be effective?
Well, and it is important in this case, and it sounds like you know very well the community you're working with. But sometimes they have very strong cultural beliefs, or they might have had bad experiences in their home countries or in refugee camps, and so it is very difficult to change people's minds. But Nancy, I mean, do we have? What would you suggest? I mean, sometimes it's reminding people, or at least helping them to understand that, in this country, most of us, hopefully most of us, believe that good mental health is as important as physical health. And the way that your mental health affects your physical health and vice versa.
Yeah, it's not just with the refugee population regarding the mental health stigma, and that's what your question is really around. It's still a struggle in this country, and so what I would do if this were an issue I was working on is it's what SAMHSA is all about. We continually work on the stigma of mental health services. Is just education, is just respecting their culture and showing them in a safe, non-judgmental way and secure and trusting way how it's, positive mental health and those services might actually benefit. Sometimes it's by, sharing stories of other success. But there are a lot of resources and websites out there now around mental health stigma and helping people understand and gain trust in that.
And sometimes it's also really helpful to get either elders or community leaders involved, help them understand that, and then they can be leaders in bringing to the community the understanding that mental health is very important, and that so community leaders, faith leaders can be very influential on this front. It's not something that you will ever be able to do on your own. It needs to really happen with the community more broadly.
Yep. That's Pedro. We're going to take one more, and Sanaya, we're not ignoring your question. But Pedro, what importance would you place on being able to effectively communicate with individuals who you are trying to help? I would place the #1 importance on that. everything we do in our world is around communication. And it's poor communication can be the downfall of a relationship, and good communication is what makes it live and breathe. So relationships and communication is of the utmost importance. Whether it's writing back and forth, whether it is, I had to do an evaluation on a civic voice project in Colombia, in the Philippines, and did not have a translator with me at one point in this interview, and we literally sat with the laptop, and I typed my questions into a web-based translator. It hit the button, it came out in the language that this gentleman understood. When he responded, he typed his question into it, typed it back, it translated into English. It took probably 3 times as long to do the interview, but we found a way to communicate, and both were satisfied at the end of it. So,
well, and it's important, too, to remember that communication is not just in terms of the language, although it's very, very important. But there are also, the importance of understanding each other's cultural practices. That is very important. That, in some places, something might be considered offensive or not, off-putting or not really what an adult does. And so it's important, too, to keep that in mind and remember that culture and their experiences and their past is as important in some cases as simply being able to translate, the words that are necessary.
We're going to move on.
If we have time at the end, we will
asking your questions. Some of them are real specific. We do have resources that we could give out to refugee clients to inform them about the effects of trauma and how to get help. We can do that. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm trying to save these chat boxes so that we can have it and respond to you guys after. Should have had Chelsea bring her computer.
We do have a question on the phone.
Okay, great.
Yes. Please go right ahead.
Our first one is from Lorraine Haggerty. Your line is open.
Mine was not a question. Actually, it was just a comment on a couple of the questions that were already asked when you were talking about best practices for mental health providers. We've invested a lot of dollars in training for interpreters and specifically for medical interpreters, but now we're seeing more and more the need for the mental health piece. So we have spent some time, and we've also worked with some people that have experience in that area and expertise in that area, and we're going to be doing a mental health interpretation training for about 20 interpreters of various languages that are prevalent in our community, and the providers are very excited about that. So I think that's one way that you can address that, because obviously training interpreters is a much faster and more economic investment than what actually training mental health providers is. And then also when you were talking about the stigma of mental health and getting people of different cultures to seek mental health services, the other thing we've done is that we had a grant that allowed us to use, just as you were talking about, a lot of trusted community advocates and leaders from the different refugee populations, and they developed a program where initially all they were doing was just doing some outreach and some communications with various people that we thought might be in need of some mental health services to get them to build up the trust and really feel comfortable that mental health issues were something that was okay to talk about and then to seek treatment for. And then when they had built up the trust with these people, then they've recommended them onto treatment, and we've had a really good success rate with that.
Thank you for your comment.
Yes.
I mean, in the end, I think, we can present to you, some of what we know, but in the end, you all are going to be the best resource for each other. Nancy and I are, absolutely available to you. Again, our contact information is at the end. but you all are actually doing the work, and so you're going to be so much more helpful to each other. So thank you so much for your comment. That was really helpful.
Chelsea and Nancy, this is Essay. If I could jump in, I also wanted to encourage refugees who are listening in to jump in and ask their questions and raise their comments as we go through the rest of the presentation, especially around questions about self-care.
Yeah. Yeah. And we will be getting more into the specifics of self-care very shortly.
Yeah. Thank you so much for everybody's questions, and we did copy, I copied what we didn't get to onto a document, so we will be able to, get that information to SA and Andre afterwards and provide any resources to them so they can get it out to the listserv of everyone who's participated. So next, compassion fatigue is the negative aspects of helping. And some of your questions and comments previously raised those issues. And so interestingly enough, just as the positive aspects of working in a helping system, so are some of the same aspects that it could be negative, which is providing care. As one of the people who commented earlier, is the fact that she never gets burned out and provides care, and that work is what actually is burns her out. So the system, if it feels broken, if you're having walls put up in front of you. There was one comment, the question that we didn't get to, that when you're constricted to a 90 days of an RMP to work with them, how do you get all of the work done that you need to do? Colleagues.
Well, also another issue with the system is that many providers and the people you're working with don't speak the same language, and that translators are hard to find and expensive. Those are also really negative aspects of the system.
So your beliefs about self, you may not feel good about yourself and your ability to do work. Your colleagues may be negative ninnies, so they say. You could be burned out, work-related trauma. So those are things that create compassion fatigue. So this was a poll. If we could put that up, Andre or Chandra, whoever's going to put this poll up real quick, you're just going to click on, because of if we could clear that poll before we started again, because I'd already checked the difficulty with sleeping before the started. So if we could clear the poll and then just check all that apply, but because of your work, and this is about you, have you experienced any of these symptoms?
And these are anonymous.
Clear the poll, clear the poll. There we go.
Oh, just a minute.
Yeah, it's anonymous. We won't.
Yeah, and this is not being collected for anything. It's completely anonymous. All we're getting is the total numbers of who clicked what.
Yeah.
So please click. It'll just be helpful for us to know, and I think for you all to know about each other, that because of your work with refugees, how many of these things have you experienced?
Okay, well, we really have a strong group here. Because none of you experience any of these. You just can click on it's not working, I think. That's the problem. Can we reopen? It says the poll's closed. Thank you. Okay, now everybody can vote. There we go.
All right, there are about 140 of you online, so please, everyone, participate.
Looks like tiredness.
We've got that too.
Yeah. Tiredness is winning, followed by worry, anxiety, or fear. And again, this is because of your work, so difficulties with sleep, physical illness, that's not good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we get a good sense of, and I don't think any of us would be surprised or surprised by the results, that people are experiencing all of these symptoms, and all the more reason why having this is a critical time.
Yep, we are glad you're here.
So, thank you. We can close that poll. And thank you. So we're going to get into the secondary trauma stress and self-care aspect of the presentation. So secondary traumatic stress is has two forms: direct contact and indirect contact. And you can get secondary traumatic stress from either one of those methods. So direct contact means your direct contact with the family, interviewing immediate family members, such as mothers, fathers, siblings, so immediate contact with the refugee population, interviewing extended family members, interviewing collateral contacts, teachers, physicians, neighbors. So it's that one-on-one contact with a person that would be considered a direct contact for secondary traumatic stress. Indirect contact is just reading the case files, medical records, court records, school records, or reading about the person's life or what's happened to them, you know, which is like listening to the news or reading the newspaper articles about events. When we read about the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, oftentimes that's a form of secondary traumatic stress. So symptoms that you're encountering secondary traumatic stress or that you need to pay attention to it is if you, and you'll see a parallel to those behaviors and symptoms that we talked about in the very beginning of the presentation around individual reactions to trauma. So the same behavior, same symptoms occur. Emotional indicators such as anger, sadness, prolonged grief, feeling of hopelessness, emotional numbing. Physical indicators are headaches, stomach aches, increased fatigue or illness. Personal indicators, self-isolation, cynicism, mood swings, you're irritable with your spouse, family, or friends, social withdrawal, workplace avoidance of certain clients, missed appointments, you're late to work, lack of motivation, you don't produce as much at work, you're not satisfied with your job, and you have increased job turnover, so you quit jobs, you don't stay at them very long. Those are symptoms that you're experiencing secondary traumatic stress. So here's another point of understanding that we'd like to take a moment to talk about is what helps you feel more like yourself or feel better while working with people who have been traumatized. And in case you haven't kind of caught on to a theme, we're trying to make this so that we think positively. We don't want to, as my mother used to say, wallow in the trauma and the grief. We want you to recognize the trauma and, in this instance, the secondary traumatic stress, but we want you to pay attention to and know that there are things in your life that you could do and around feeling better. So if you experience secondary traumatic stress symptoms, what helps you feel more like yourself or feel better personally? And let's see if we get a few comments in here.
Okay,
the last
so
one
far,
about the poll.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's see, is anyone, okay, so very good. Carolina, active listening, breathing, and centering myself.
Excellent.
Excellent. Setting aside time for play and creativity. Lindsay, very nice. Erlyn, please press star 1.
Sorry, operator, you keep saying this, I'm going to keep forgetting.
Star 1.
Star 1.
Star 1.
So anyone who wants to talk, star 1. Astra, walking, talking, and music. And Mia, success. That's a person who's got some drive there. Armand, my personal view is the client feels and sees in you a compassionate individual who cares. David, meditation, exercise, good regular sleep schedule. Yep. Events that are simply for fun, like potlucks and picnics. Megan, reminding herself of the successes of previous clients who experienced similar issues upon arrival.
That's a really good one.
That's a really, really good one. Charles, the amazing resiliency of the clients and working with an organization that deals with torture survivors. The thing that always helps is to not focus on the negative but see positives. Humans are so resilient. Kudos to you, Charles. Yeah. And Penny, *1 if you'd like to talk. Absolutely. Those are great, great ways to make yourself feel better. Excellent job, you guys.
Is anyone waiting on the line to talk?
There are no questions on the phone. So
Okay.
So some strategies to promote collaboration in a positive work environment, and this can possibly, I hope, is going to go to the person who asked earlier about management, and so now we're focusing not on ourselves personally, but on our work environment and how we can make our work a positive place to be while we do this really hard work. So again, not rocket science, but things we often forget about. Minimizing negative words. You know, try not to use can't or no, never, or should, like telling someone they should do something. That's a negative word. One of my first teaching assignment, my first teaching assignment was at a school for individuals with autism, and we were not allowed to use the word no. And I had at the time a 2-year-old son. Very, very difficult. I don't think we realize how often we say no in our lives. So at the end of the day, our classrooms had a one-way mirror where we could be observed in a video camera too. So that was like part of the contract. And at the end of the day, I'd be walking out, and I'll never forget, I stopped, and director would stop me and say, Nancy, do you know that you said no 36 times today? And I'm like, really? Because I'm really working on that. And so it took a while, but I did finally conquer it. And what I noticed was that it helped extremely in my parenting skills with my 2-year-old son, because I stopped using no with him at home as well. So that's a really powerful tool. Hard to do. Give anyone that challenge that wants to take it, but it really does work. Remind yourself that most of us are doing the best we can. Acknowledge people's best intentions. You know, several of you commented, and I could tell that you have very strong work ethics. Well, anyone in this field would only have to have a strong work ethic, dedication, and commitment. But we have to recognize that not everyone works the way we do. And so oftentimes when we are working really hard and expelling 150% of our energy, and we're totally committed to the work, and we see office mates that we think, in our opinion, aren't working like we are, aren't staying as late, or aren't putting in the extra hours, or aren't taking home case files to read, or aren't making that extra call on the weekend to check in, or whatever it is you do that you personally feel is going above and beyond. You know, not everyone works that way, but it doesn't mean that they're not doing their job to the best of their ability. So we want to make sure we note and comment on people's accomplishments and strengths. Recognize when other people are doing good work. Be a supportive coworker, supervisor, manager, leader. Try to increase the times you say, I appreciate your effort, or you look like you could use some help, or I know we can figure this out together. A school that I was an administrator in, we used a coaching technique. So anyone could coach anyone, and if we could hear in someone's tone that they were feeling stressed or not having, we would coach them through it. You know, it sounds like you're having a hard time. How can I help you? Oops, I almost just shut down my computer by mistake. So we're going to go back full circle to resilience, rules of the road for resiliency. I want to make sure I didn't skip. Okay. So to build resiliency, you need to have confidentiality. What is said in this meeting will stay in this meeting, and that's just an example of how to build confidentiality. So if a coworker comes to you to talk about a problem that they're having or a conflict, you know, we want to make sure you have that, you respect that privacy and that confidentiality. Same with the populations that you're working with. Only the situations are named during discussions. Our work is focused on problem solving, not name calling. It's not the person that we're doing the work with. It's not the people. It's the work that we're doing. So it's removing that personal conflict from the conversation. Another thing is attendance. So you want to develop group cohesion and trust and develop a common language among staff that promotes resilient and mutual support. Everyone, staff, supervisors, managers, attends meetings regularly on time. Everyone must feel like they have equal participation and equal weight in discussions at work and in the environment and the climate of the work. And venting. Venting is converted into a constructive discussion. So we don't want our meetings to become where everyone just complains and crabs and walks away and nobody feels better. So it's okay to vent, but let's try to make them as constructive as possible. So always have a positive action item that comes out of them. Focus on the positive. We speak with each other in positive terms and work together in learning, problem solving, and mutual support. Unspoken issues and assumptions can be destructive. Elephants in the rooms are very, very destructive. Walk the walk. So it's human nature to fall back into old patterns, but saying one thing during a staff meeting and doing another thing with your clients is damaging. And a goal is to become aware of your day-to-day actions and reactions when you're working with other people. Develop new and successful ways of managing difficult situations. So this is just a really cool graphic about looking at yourself and to monitor your own heat level. Dark blue, of course, calm, cool, I'm okay. Red is I'm angry, frustrated. In getting a good sense of your color zones, I'm speeding up here because we are running out of time and I want to get to self-care. It's important, we call this promoting the 3 Ps. So we want to perceive your emotions, both positive and negative. Not saying to bury your negative thoughts. We need to identify them and understand them and perceive them, but it's what we do with those negative thoughts with work. So we identify the emotions you're experiencing, notice your thoughts and behaviors in a particular situation. Process the intensity of your negative emotions. Recognize that level of intensity you feel when you experience those negative emotions. And practice monitoring. As someone had said, I think Carolina, the breathing. So Carolina perceives when she's perhaps noticing something, a negative interaction or something that doesn't usually make her feel good. So she processes, is this going to make me feel really bad today, or am I going to be okay with this? And practice, depending on her response, what her reaction needs to be. Does she need to, like, step into another room and breathe a little, count to 10, collect ourselves around the conversation before we enter it? So some ideas for self-care, and you guys already mentioned them, physical, emotional, professional. We can take a break during the day, be aware of your limitations, listen to how you feel, find a healthy outlet. Sometimes I have to go for a long run, even if it's really late at night inside on the treadmill, just to expel that energy and get the thoughts out of my head around work. Have lunch away from your desk. I know oftentimes we sit at our desk and have our lunch, but we don't ever really stop that working and that processing. I think for me personally, setting limits is something hard for me to do. Spiritual self-care, finding meaning in things. Someone mentioned praying and meditating. Social, become a part of a team sport. Seek out positive people in your world. Learn to ask for help. That's always been a hard one for me. Psychological, time for self-reflection, engage in relaxing activities, and balance. I have a shirt that talks about balance on it, but I don't always pay attention to it. These are things that we need to pay attention to and take the time to do it. You know, oftentimes we look around and I'll say to myself, well, everybody else seems to be doing it, taking care of themselves, but I don't know if it's like that martyr in us and those in this field. We have the need to feel like we don't need that, we're stronger than that, but in all actuality, it just really makes us weaker, and we end up doing not as good of a job in helping others when we don't help ourselves. So I think we're going to pass this one because I think you guys already did a really good job of giving us examples of what you do to take care of yourselves. So this is an example of a 5-minute daily self-awareness break that you could take. Doesn't even have to be 5 minutes, could be even less. But it's just to take a couple minutes to stop and pay attention to what's going on in your life around you. Observe what's going on inside and out of you. Choose a new way of being and doing now. During these breaks, make believe that you're in a bubble and only notice what is happening to you and around you. Be aware of your feelings, your thoughts, and your behaviors. And oftentimes these little shifts in self-awareness can transform the quality of our lives. Just gave the 4-minute mic. So create a positive workplace individually, get to know your coworkers, build confidence on the job, use objective criteria to give awards, recognize success. These are managers, make sure the work is assigned fairly, build confidence and support when a job is well done. Supervisors hold the key to a good work environment. You need to have clear expectations of your workers. Get your team on your side, motivate your employees through your enthusiasm. Supervisors set the tone, set the pace. Your team, your staff are going to behave just as you behave. It is no different than as a parent and our children do what they see us do. Our staff and teams see us and do what we do. Treat people fairly and consistently, compliment in public, criticize, or I'd like to say coach in private. Help workers see the contribution they are making toward the mission of the agency, and encourage and support your workers' development. We all need to personally and professionally grow in order to feel as if we're moving forward in our lives. So remember that negative thoughts can happen automatically. It's just kind of like when what we never wanted to say that our parents used to say to us, and all of a sudden it's escaping our mouths, and we're like, oh, where did that come from? It happens. But just thinking positively, you're already making a move towards it. So there's something to remember, REM. Instead of accepting your negative thoughts, recognize your negative thoughts, evaluate the situation. Is it really as bad as it seems? And are there opportunities you didn't see at first because you jumped to being negative? And then modify your thinking. So I think we're going to just open it up to questions. Right now, we were going to do an understanding of what's stressing you, what can you change. But I think if we just go to our questions page, there's our resources, and here's our contact. I'm going to leave that up on the screen because we have a lot of questions, and I'm going to start from the end. Sabrina heard that having a good sense of humor is one of the best strategies. Is that correct? Well, Sabrina, yes. I like to laugh every day. Multiple times. And oftentimes you have to, people who don't work in your field might hear you, they might think, well, that's a little off color, but, you got to laugh about what you're doing. And we do. We have to find the humor in what we're doing and use it, of course, appropriately so. But, yeah, I think it is the best stress reliever.
And also, if anyone wants to ask questions, again, all you need to do is hit *1 to talk.
I don't think they're going to hang up on us or anything. I hope not. So Sarah says trying to connect with them in other aspects, recognizing our similarities and working through that, making sure you focus on how you can help them and how they can help you. Excellent point. Mm-hmm. And that, I think we got everything. Any questions? I feel like we zipped through that end part, but again, this webinar will be archived. Chelsea, you know where it's going to be?
Not yet. We're working on it.
Okay. But everyone who registered will get an email, I'm sure, with that. As well as I will, there's a couple of questions that we did, only 2 questions that we didn't get to, and also the link for the language access barrier when serving refugee parents that someone gave us. I'll make sure Andre and SA get that information. And anything else before we hang up or before I hand it back over to S.A.? Oh, so will the PowerPoint slides be circulated? I'm fine with that. Andre and S.A. have the final PowerPoint slides, even with the I can send it even with the note boxes on it. So that's up to them. If you want to send that out to the listserv, you're more than welcome to do that. Or you can email me or Chelsea, and we can send it to you. And Erlyn, I see your question, and I'm going to copy it, and we will pass that on and get you an answer, okay?
Nancy and Chelsea, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation, the overview on different sources of stress, the compassion, satisfaction, and fatigue, and self-care, and for making yourselves available as ongoing resources. We'll be happy to send out the presentation to everyone on our listserv. And thank you to all of the audience members for all of the thoughtful comments and for sharing your experiences with self-care. We hope to continue this as a series on emotional wellness and get more and more refugees engaged in this discussion. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for participating in today's conference. You may disconnect at this time.